Christmas did not break my marriage. It only showed me how long it had been cracked. That was the thought running through my head as I stood in the middle of our living room on December 24th, holding a strand of cheap white lights that only half worked, while Emma looked at me like I had failed some test I never knew I was taking. The tree leaned slightly toward the window, our son's paper ornaments hanging from the branches beside a few red bulbs we had owned since our first apartment, back when we thought simple things were enough because we still had each other. Outside, snow brushed against the glass in soft little bursts, the kind Ohio gets before it decides whether it wants to be pretty or dangerous. Inside, the house smelled like pine, burnt sugar cookies, and the quiet disappointment of a woman who no longer knew how to speak to her husband without measuring him against someone else. Emma stood near the fireplace in a cream sweater, arms folded, her phone glowing in her hand with pictures from her friend's holiday party across town. All champagne glasses, velvet dresses, perfect staircases, and men who looked like they had never changed their own oil. "This is it?" she asked, her voice low enough that our 8-year-old son, Caleb, might not hear from the hallway, but sharp enough that I felt every word. I looked at the tree, then at the stockings, then at the small stack of wrapped gifts under the branches, each one bought carefully, budgeted down to the dollar, chosen with more love than money. "It is Christmas Eve," I said. "We are home. Caleb is excited. That should count for something." Emma laughed once, not loud, not happy, just tired and cruel in that polished way she had learned over the years. "You always say that when you cannot do better." I did not answer right away. I could have told her about the extra shifts at the machine shop, about the furnace repair bill that had eaten the gift money, about the truck payment I had stretched until Friday because Caleb needed winter boots. I could have reminded her that Christmas was not supposed to be a performance for people who only watched from behind screens. But marriage teaches a man when words will land and when they will only fall at someone's feet like spare change. So I stood there with the broken lights in my hand, feeling the tiny plastic bulbs press into my palm, and watched her gather her coat from the chair. "Where are you going?" I asked, already knowing the answer from the way she checked her reflection in the dark television screen. "Marissa invited me over," she said. "At least someone knows how to celebrate." From the hallway, Caleb appeared in his flannel pajamas, his hair still damp from the bath, holding the little cardboard reindeer he had made at school. "Mom, are we opening one present tonight?" he asked. Emma's face shifted for half a second, almost soft, almost the woman I married. Then her phone buzzed, and whatever guilt had reached her eyes disappeared. "Ask your father," she said. "He is in charge of small Christmases." The door closed behind her 10 minutes later, not slammed, not dramatic, just final in a way that made the whole house seem colder. Caleb looked up at me, confused, trying to decide whether this was normal because children trust adults to name the world for them. I knelt beside him and fixed a smile that felt heavier than any tool I had ever lifted. "How about we make hot chocolate and open the reindeer mug?" I said. He nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed on the door. That night, while Emma missed the quiet magic she had stopped believing in, I sat on the floor with my son under a crooked tree, drinking cocoa from chipped mugs, listening to snow brush the windows. I did not know then that by New Year's, the thing she thought made me small would become the truth that shattered every assumption she had about me. Morning came slowly after the quiet tension of Christmas Eve, and Michael Thompson rose before the sun, pulling on a worn flannel shirt and thick work pants, the faint smell of motor oil lingering on his hands from last night's repairs. He moved through the small kitchen with deliberate calm, preparing scrambled eggs and oatmeal for Caleb, his 8-year-old son, who patted and still in pajamas, hair sticking up from sleep, clutching a small wooden train he had received months earlier. The pale winter light seeped through frost-lined windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor and onto the table where the unfinished Christmas decorations from the previous night sat in a heap, untangled and half-lit. Michael spoke in a soft, steady voice, asking about homework and school projects, listening carefully to every word, his face a mixture of fatigue and focus, not a trace of the frustration or disappointment Emma had left behind. Outside, the Ford truck waited in the driveway, dusted lightly with snow, and Michael planned the day ahead. Morning at the garage, repairs for neighbors, a delivery for a local farm, and a stop at the hardware store for parts needed to finish the week's work. Caleb ate quietly, occasionally looking up at his father with wide eyes, sensing the weight of responsibility Michael carried without complaint. The garage smelled faintly of oil, wood shavings, and the crisp cold air that seeped through the doors, grounding Michael in the reality of his life, ordinary yet rich with purpose. He spoke to Caleb about fixing the old John Deere before school and how to approach it carefully, modeling patience and diligence through small actions and calm guidance. Meanwhile, Emma's absence hovered, not in a way that disrupted the day, but as a shadow against which Michael measured his own constancy and quiet resilience. Each movement, each decision, from the careful stirring of oatmeal to the way he folded Caleb's jacket for school, was executed with intentionality, the kind of steady precision that builds trust and security in a child's mind without drama or spectacle. Michael listened as Caleb chattered about his friends and the upcoming school play, nodding and asking questions, fully present, fully engaged, yet maintaining the inner space that allowed him to plan for the unseen challenges to come. He reminded himself as he drove Caleb to school that the world outside would continue judging, comparing, and mocking appearances, but inside the small bubble of garage, home, and morning routines, value was measured differently. Quiet competence, consistency, and care were the true measures of success, and in these hours of early light, Michael built the foundation that would soon become invisible strength, ready for the tests that lay ahead in the new year. By noon on Christmas Day, Emma had returned with a paper shopping bag, tired eyes, and the careful silence of someone who wanted the house to forget she had chosen somewhere else the night before. Caleb was in the living room building a small wooden bridge from craft sticks and glue, humming to himself beneath the crooked tree, while I stood at the sink rinsing breakfast plates and watching snow melt along the edge of the driveway. Emma set the bag on the counter and pulled out a toy she had clearly bought that morning at the only drugstore open within 10 miles. "For Caleb," she said, as if the word gift could cover the absence. I dried my hands on a towel and nodded. "He will appreciate it." She looked at me then, maybe expecting judgment, maybe hoping for an argument she could turn into proof that I was the problem. I gave her neither. That seemed to irritate her more than anger would have. "Do you know what Marissa's husband gave her?" she asked, leaning against the counter, her voice low. I kept my eyes on the plate in my hand. "No, a trip to Aspen. First class. 5 nights." She waited for that to land. I stacked the plate in the cabinet. "That sounds nice." Emma laughed under her breath. "Of course that is your answer. Everything just sounds nice to you because you never imagined being the kind of man who can actually do it." The kitchen went still except for Caleb's small voice in the next room, counting craft sticks one by one. I felt the old instinct rise, the need to explain overtime hours, bills, groceries, tires, heating oil, school fees, all the invisible math that held a family together. But explanations had become another kind of begging, and I was tired of placing my dignity on the table for someone who only counted dollars. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. Emma glanced toward the living room, then lowered her voice even more. "I want you to want more. I want you to stop acting like this small life is noble." "It is not noble, Michael. It is embarrassing." There it was, clean and sharp. Not disappointment. Disgust. She did not hate that Christmas had been small. She hated that it reflected the man she believed I was. I looked past her to the front window, where the neighbor's inflatable snowman leaned sideways in the yard, smiling through a layer of ice. Somewhere in town, families were sitting down to ham, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and laughter that did not need to be photographed to be real. In our kitchen, the air felt colder than the weather outside. Emma's phone lit up on the counter with a message from Marissa, a picture from a bright room full of polished people and expensive wrapping paper. Emma turned the screen toward me like evidence. "This is what normal looks like when a husband provides." I wiped a drop of water from the counter. "No, Emma. That is what pictures look like." Her face tightened. Before she could answer, Caleb walked in carrying his little bridge with both hands, proud and careful. "Dad, look. It holds the train." I crouched, studying it like it was a real piece of engineering. "That is strong work, buddy." He smiled, then looked at his mother. "Do you want to see?" Emma's expression softened for only a moment before impatience returned. "In a minute." Caleb's smile faded just enough that I noticed. Maybe she did not. That was the part that hurt most. Not what she said to me, but what she kept missing in him. Later that afternoon, she left again for a holiday brunch with friends, wearing earrings I had bought her 3 anniversaries ago when she still thanked me for things. Caleb and I stayed home. We ate grilled cheese and tomato soup. We watched an old Christmas movie with commercials. He fell asleep against my shoulder before the ending, warm and trusting, his small hand resting on my sleeve. I sat there in the blue light of the television, listening to the furnace click on and off, and understood something I had been avoiding for months. Emma was not waiting for our life to improve. She was waiting for a different life to arrive and replace us. The following week began like any other for Michael Thompson, with frost lining the edges of the driveway and the quiet hum of the old furnace filling the kitchen. Caleb was up early again, insisting on helping his father with pancakes, his small hands clumsy but determined, spilling syrup occasionally onto the linoleum floor. Michael moved calmly, flipping the eggs with precision, his face betraying no frustration even when the batter threatened to overflow the pan. He had spent the early morning organizing invoices and repair orders for the garage, preparing for a week of cold mornings, short days, and long nights that would see him working double shifts if necessary. The phone rang at 7:30, a neighbor needing help with a tractor that would not start before the frost melted, and Michael answered without hesitation, jotting notes on a small pad while Caleb watched, fascinated by his father's efficiency and calm command of each task. Meanwhile, Emma had left for a brunch with friends she had invited at the last minute, dressed in a coat that shimmered faintly in the early sun, carrying a coffee cup and a designer bag, her expression perfectly neutral, but her mind preoccupied with social comparisons and the subtle critique of every man around her, especially Michael. She did not notice the tiny snowflakes melting on the sidewalk or the blue Ford waiting patiently in the driveway, or the way Caleb had tried to press his handmade gift into her hands before she left. By 9, Michael had bundled Caleb into the Ford, seats warm from the heater, and drove toward the hardware store for the supplies needed to finish a week of overdue repairs. The streets were quiet, cars sparse, streetlights flickering as they passed, and Caleb chattered about small things, the new school project, a friend he wanted to see, completely unaware of the weight of responsibility carried silently by his father. At the garage, Michael set to work immediately, the smell of oil and cold metal filling the space, tools organized, machinery humming, and invoices stacked neatly, the rhythm of his labor precise and methodical. Each bolt tightened, each engine checked, each client interaction handled with calm confidence became a small affirmation that life could continue without drama, even when love had faltered and Emma had chosen appearances over family. By afternoon, the day had progressed, clients serviced, deliveries made, and Michael returned home, cheeks flushed from the cold and the effort, Caleb asleep in the passenger seat, his small fingers curled around a stuffed toy, trusting implicitly in the steadiness of his father. Michael carried him inside, tucked him into bed with a soft blanket, kissed his forehead, and then sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee while reviewing a small envelope that had arrived from a lawyer days before, the contents a quiet reminder of possibilities he had yet to explore. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows slightly, but inside, the house smelled of pancakes, waxed floors, and the quiet calm of a man who had chosen patience, strategy, and care over confrontation, his eyes reflecting a resolve that would soon turn the coming weeks into a plan for stability, future prosperity, and the protection of the small family he still held together. That evening, Michael Thompson returned home with a quiet determination, the driveway still glistening from a light snow that had begun in the late afternoon, and Caleb running ahead to open the door, leaving little footprints along the welcome mat. The house was silent except for the low hum of the heater, and Michael paused in the hallway, noticing the slight tilt of the Christmas tree lights, the same handmade ornaments Caleb had hung the night before, and the small stack of gifts he had carefully wrapped himself. He set down his coat and boots, the sound muted against the wood floor, and walked to the kitchen, where he found a note left by Emma, lunch at Marissa's. Back late. Do not wait for me. Her handwriting was neat, precise, almost formal, betraying no warmth. Michael took a deep breath, then set out a plate of food for Caleb, his movements deliberate, calm, and steady, the kind of calm that carried authority without anger. He glanced at the envelope from the lawyer resting on the counter, unopened but pressing with the promise of something he had yet to understand fully, and set it aside for now, focusing instead on the small priorities that defined his day. Ensuring Caleb ate, checking the furnace, and making sure the water heater was working properly. After lunch, he walked with Caleb to the garage, explaining how to check oil levels, how to tighten bolts properly, and how to recognize when a part might fail, his voice patient, steady, and instructive. Each word was a lesson, not just in mechanics, but in observation, resilience, and careful planning, values he wanted his son to carry through life. Outside, the sky turned a pale blue, the sun low and angled, reflecting against the Ford parked nearby, casting long shadows across the driveway. Michael listened to Caleb chatter about friends and school projects, the sound filling the quiet garage, and he answered each question without impatience, balancing engagement with efficiency, showing that even ordinary moments could hold meaning when handled thoughtfully. Emma's absence, as usual, weighed lightly over the room, a silent reminder of her choices and expectations, yet Michael allowed it to be background noise rather than a distraction. By late afternoon, he had finished a small repair for a local neighbor, written invoices, and prepared parts for a delivery the next morning, the rhythm of his labor grounding him in a sense of control and purpose. He returned inside with Caleb, who had made a small model of a snow-covered house from blocks, placing it carefully on the mantel. Michael crouched beside him, studying it, offering quiet praise, and then sat back in a chair, allowing the warmth of the home and the satisfaction of small accomplishments to fill him. That evening, he reviewed the envelope again, the weight of unseen opportunity pressing gently against his consciousness, and Michael knew that patience, strategy, and steady work would transform what was unseen into the reality that would change their lives, even if Emma remained unaware of the unfolding truth. Late that week, Michael Thompson found himself standing in the garage after a long morning of repairs, Caleb quietly playing with his model train on the floor nearby, the scent of engine oil and faint pine from the leftover holiday decorations blending into a familiar comfort. Michael had spent the morning coordinating deliveries, checking vehicles, and making calls to suppliers, all the while keeping his movements measured and precise, each task a small proof of his competence and patience. The sun filtered through the high windows, casting streaks across the concrete floor and highlighting the worn workbenches, the scattered tools, and the envelopes he had not yet opened from the lawyer, reminders of opportunities still waiting. Michael adjusted his flannel shirt and leaned against the workbench, watching Caleb carefully navigate a set of train tracks, offering guidance without intrusion, demonstrating attention, care, and focus. Outside, the pale winter light reflected on the driveway, the blue Ford parked with a dusting of snow, a quiet witness to the small but steady life Michael had built despite the absence of recognition. Emma had called again, checking on plans for a holiday brunch with friends, her voice polite but distant, indicating a world of expectation she continued to pursue outside their home. Michael listened without reaction, making mental notes but remaining grounded in the reality of his work, his son, and the quiet power of preparation. Each minor repair, each conversation with clients, each moment teaching Caleb about responsibility and diligence, added to the invisible framework of control Michael maintained, a foundation of stability and future opportunity built without flash or spectacle. He reviewed the paperwork for the estate quietly on a corner of the workbench, noting details about property, investments, and contracts, all of which could be leveraged carefully and discreetly. But he allowed himself no rush, no outward excitement, choosing instead to absorb the information and plan in silence. Caleb asked a question about fixing a small engine model, and Michael responded patiently, demonstrating step-by-step procedures and emphasizing observation, awareness, and careful adjustment, traits that mirrored the larger strategy Michael was implementing with the trust he had been given. Time passed in the quiet rhythm of ordinary tasks, punctuated only by the hum of equipment, the occasional footstep, and the soft scraping of train wheels across the wooden tracks. By late afternoon, Michael felt a deep sense of accomplishment in the ordinary, knowing that the accumulation of these careful, consistent actions would create a future far larger than the present moment, a future that would protect Caleb, sustain the family, and eventually reveal the strength and foresight he had carried silently through days of neglect, judgment, and the subtle cruelty of others' expectations. The garage, the tools, the unfinished repairs, and the gentle presence of his son provided the stage for a quiet transformation, one that would unfold fully in time, demonstrating the difference between what looks small and what truly matters in the measured, patient life of a man who knew the value of persistence. Over the following week, Michael Thompson continued his quiet routine, arriving at the garage before sunrise, boots crunching on frost-lined gravel, coffee in hand, Caleb's small backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes wide with curiosity about the day ahead. Inside, the warm light from hanging work lamps illuminated the familiar smell of oil, metal, and the faint lingering scent of pine from the last holiday, blending into a comforting rhythm. Michael's hands moved steadily as he inspected the engines waiting for repair, adjusting bolts, checking oil levels, and guiding his apprentice with calm instruction, his expression composed and determined, not a trace of frustration despite the mounting demands of the season. Outside, the snow melted slowly under the pale winter sun, reflecting streaks of light across the driveway and onto the blue Ford, parked like a sentinel watching over the small but orderly property. Emma had called mid-morning, asking about brunch plans with friends she had invited, her voice polite but distant, unconsciously measuring his reaction and finding none. Michael responded briefly, focusing instead on the rhythm of his work, the invoices stacked neatly on the corner of the bench, the engine components lined up in precise order, and Caleb's small questions about gears and tracks. Each response he gave was patient, deliberate, reinforcing a calm presence that anchored his son in safety and quiet learning. By midday, a neighbor arrived with a tractor that would not start, and Michael walked him through each step, showing how to check fluids, test circuits, and recognize worn parts, all while explaining principles of observation and diligence, instilling lessons beyond mechanics. Caleb watched closely, absorbing the tone, the measured motions, and the quiet authority his father displayed without raising his voice or demanding attention. The afternoon passed in a series of steady motions, broken only by small interruptions, phone calls for parts, or deliveries that Michael managed efficiently and calmly. By late afternoon, Michael returned home, Caleb chatting softly in the passenger seat about school projects and upcoming science fairs, eyes bright with engagement, his father's quiet presence providing both stability and inspiration. Inside, they settled by the small table near the fireplace, warm light reflecting off the wood, and Michael reviewed the unopened envelope from the lawyer again, studying the numbers, property listings, and business outlines without rushing, allowing himself the patience to understand and plan before action. Caleb built a small bridge from wooden blocks, and Michael knelt beside him, pointing out structural strengths, asking questions about weight distribution and balance, subtly connecting lessons of mechanics to lessons of life and responsibility. As night approached, Michael set aside the envelope, appreciating the rhythm of the day, the soft quiet of the house, the sense of progress in ordinary tasks, and the growing understanding that steady, consistent effort, patience, and attention to detail were preparing him for a future that would reveal its rewards not through drama or confrontation, but through measured action, foresight, and the quiet accumulation of success that his family would one day fully witness. The final days before New Year's carried a strange stillness, as if the house itself had grown tired of pretending everything was ordinary. Emma spent more time away than home, drifting between brunches, shopping trips, and long phone calls with friends who spoke about resolutions, vacations, and the kind of life she believed she had been denied. Michael stopped asking where she was going, not because he did not care, but because the answers had become less important than the pattern. Caleb noticed more than either of them wanted to admit. He stopped asking whether his mother would be home for dinner and started asking whether his father could help him finish his bridge project instead. That small change settled in Michael's chest like a stone. Children do not always announce when they are disappointed. Sometimes they simply adjust their expectations and call it growing up. On December 30th, after dropping Caleb at a neighbor's house for a playdate, Michael drove to Columbus for the meeting he had postponed twice. The sky was low and gray, the highway wet with melted snow, and the Ford's heater rattled like it was arguing with winter itself. The lawyer's office sat on the 12th floor of a downtown building with tinted windows and quiet elevators. A woman named Rebecca Hale met him in a conference room overlooking the city, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her voice calm enough to make difficult news feel organized. She confirmed what the documents had only hinted at. Michael's late uncle had left him controlling interest in a regional equipment leasing company, several commercial properties near Cincinnati, farmland in 3 counties, and investment accounts that had been managed quietly for years. The total value was far beyond anything Michael had allowed himself to imagine. He did not smile when she said it. He looked down at his hands, the same hands Emma once saw only as proof of labor, and felt the room tilt in silence. Rebecca explained the conditions. Nothing reckless. No public announcement until the tax review cleared. No sudden transfers during domestic uncertainty. No emotional decisions. The estate had been structured to protect the assets from exactly the kind of chaos that could follow sudden money. Your uncle trusted you because you are steady, she said. Do not stop being steady now. Michael drove home with the signed copies in a locked folder on the passenger seat, passing gas stations, strip malls, and bare winter fields that looked no different than they had that morning. That was the first lesson of money he had never had. The world does not change its face just because your life does. When he picked up Caleb, his son climbed into the truck carrying a paper crown from the playdate and asked if they could make New Year's pancakes. Michael said yes. At home, Emma was standing in the kitchen in a black coat, checking her reflection in the microwave door. Marissa is hosting tomorrow night, she said. Do not wait up. Michael set the locked folder on the counter and placed his keys beside it. Emma glanced at it, then back at her phone, uninterested. More repair bills? She asked. He looked at the folder, then at her, and felt a calm so deep it almost felt like mercy. Something like that, he said. Caleb ran in from the hallway with the paper crown crooked on his head, asking where the pancake mix was. Michael turned away from Emma and opened the pantry. Behind him, the folder sat in plain sight, carrying a future she still could not recognize because it did not arrive wrapped in glitter, posted online, or handed to her by someone wearing a polished smile. By New Year's Eve, Michael Thompson's life had taken on a quiet rhythm that was almost imperceptible to anyone watching from the outside. He rose early, the winter light seeping through frost-covered windows, preparing breakfast for Caleb with the same steady care he had maintained all season. Pancakes and hot chocolate arranged neatly on the small kitchen table, steam rising in gentle swirls as his son laughed and recounted stories from school. The Ford sat in the driveway, snow melting along its roof, while Michael mentally ran through the details of the estate paperwork he had received days before, reviewing property listings, investment accounts, and contracts with a calm meticulousness that contrasted sharply with the world outside, where Emma flitted from brunch to shopping trips with practiced poise, her attention divided between appearances and the subtle social competitions she had learned to value above all else. Caleb finished his breakfast and ran ahead to retrieve his paper crown from the playroom, placing it crookedly on his head as Michael straightened it, the small act anchoring the child in a sense of order and care that he had always associated with his father. Later that morning, Michael walked through the garage, checking tools, cleaning work surfaces, and organizing parts for upcoming repairs, each motion precise and methodical, the smell of oil and metal blending with the faint remnants of holiday pine to create a familiar, grounding atmosphere. He paused occasionally to answer Caleb's questions about how engines worked, the distribution of weight in a model bridge, or the small details of his homework, explaining patiently and calmly, reinforcing values of observation, diligence, and careful planning without raising his voice or demanding attention. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches, the occasional snowflake drifting past the windows, but inside, the warmth of the heater and the soft hum of the Ford in the driveway created a cocoon of steadiness and reliability. By early afternoon, Michael had completed repairs for the local farm tractor, logged invoices, and scheduled deliveries, his mind quietly reviewing the estate documents in the corner of the workbench, considering every detail, every opportunity, without letting urgency or emotion dictate his pace. Caleb played nearby, building and dismantling small wooden structures, Michael occasionally offering a guiding hand or quiet advice, connecting the lessons of mechanics to the greater lessons of life, responsibility, and patience. When the evening approached, Michael returned home from the garage, the sky a muted gray, and he found Caleb already in pajamas, brushing his teeth, small voice asking about New Year's plans. Michael reassured him simply, calmly, emphasizing continuity, care, and the quiet joy of shared routines. The locked envelope sat on the counter, an unseen promise of what was coming, and Michael allowed himself a single breath, feeling the weight of knowledge, the potential of preparation, and the satisfaction of planning for a future that would reveal itself fully in time, all while maintaining the calm and consistency that had protected his son, preserved the family home, and quietly set the stage for the new year to bring its unexpected transformations. The first day of the new year arrived with a cold sun spilling across frost-lined rooftops and icy sidewalks, the kind of morning that felt both empty and full of potential. Michael Thompson rose early, wearing his usual flannel and worn work boots, preparing breakfast for Caleb with precise, deliberate motions, each step measured, calm, and steady, the faint smell of syrup and coffee mixing with the lingering scent of motor oil from the garage. Caleb sat at the table, animatedly recounting stories from his playdate and the small paper crafts he had made, occasionally spilling a drop of juice, which Michael cleaned without comment, guiding his son with gentle patience and quiet authority. Outside, the Ford truck waited, its hood frosted lightly, a reliable companion ready for errands and deliveries. While Michael reviewed in his mind the plans for the day, the pending repairs at the garage, the calls to suppliers, and the meticulous organization of invoices, all while balancing the unspoken weight of the estate documents sitting quietly in a locked folder at home. Emma had not been home yet, her schedule dictated by brunches and social obligations that seemed to stretch endlessly into the morning, her attention on appearances, friends, and the indirect comparison of her life to others, while she left Michael and Caleb to the rhythm of their ordinary but meaningful day. By late morning, Michael had taken Caleb to the hardware store, teaching him how to choose the right wrench for a small repair, explaining why each tool mattered, and how to observe details others might overlook, turning even routine errands into lessons in responsibility and careful thought. The day unfolded with a series of quiet achievements. A neighbor's tractor repaired efficiently, parts delivered and organized for upcoming jobs, the garage humming with controlled energy, and Caleb learning the value of observation, diligence, and calm decision-making. When they returned home, the envelope from the lawyer caught Michael's eye again, its sealed edges promising opportunity and transformation, yet he set it aside with measured patience, knowing that timing, discretion, and careful planning were as valuable as the contents themselves. Caleb settled with a book and a small snack, Michael watching for a moment before retreating to the kitchen to make coffee and review minor invoices, the house quiet except for the occasional hum of the heater and the wind brushing the windows. He reflected on the balance of small acts and long-term strategy, realizing that each mundane task, fixing a bolt, guiding his son, organizing invoices, planning deliveries, was building the foundation for the life he envisioned, a life that would reveal its strength quietly, deliberately, and unmistakably to those who had underestimated him, while maintaining the warmth, stability, and subtle joy that defined the home he protected, the son he nurtured, and the future that was quietly coming into place without fanfare or spectacle. By the afternoon of January 1st, Emma finally came home with her mascara softened at the edges and the brittle calm of a woman trying to pretend exhaustion was elegance. Caleb was in the living room building his bridge again, this time testing it with little stacks of coins while I sat beside him, helping him count the weight in ounces because he wanted the project to feel official. Emma stopped in the doorway and looked at us, then at the kitchen, then at the small house that had somehow become too quiet for the kind of entrance she wanted to make. "Marissa is hosting a New Year's charity reception tonight," she said, setting her purse on the counter. "It is for local business owners and donors. She says I should come." I kept my eyes on Caleb's bridge. "Then go." She waited, but I did not look up fast enough for her. "You are invited too," she added, though the words sounded less like kindness and more like a dare. Caleb glanced at me, curious. I could already see the calculation in Emma's face. She wanted me there as proof of what she had endured, the plain husband in old boots standing under chandeliers, while men in tailored suits made her feel like she had options. A month earlier, I might have refused. That day, I heard Rebecca Hale's voice in my mind telling me not to make emotional decisions. The tax review had cleared enough for limited disclosure. The new holding structure had been filed. The regional equipment company was no longer just a secret folder on my counter. It had a name, a board, a transfer schedule, and a future. What time? I asked. Emma blinked. 7. I nodded. Caleb and I will be ready. She looked at my flannel shirt, then gave a small, tired smile that did not reach her eyes. Please wear something appropriate. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because some people only recognize a man when fabric tells them to. At 7, I drove us to the reception in the Ford, Caleb in the back seat wearing a navy sweater, Emma beside me in silence, her perfume filling the cab like a memory from a life that no longer fit. The event was held at a restored brick hall downtown, all warm lights, polished floors, and tall windows looking out over icy streets. I saw Marissa near the entrance, sparkling with practiced cheer. I saw men shaking hands like every conversation had a price tag. I saw Emma straighten her shoulders as if entering that room might rescue her from the smallness she had assigned to me. Then I saw Rebecca Hale standing near the stage, speaking with the mayor and the head of the county development board. Her eyes found mine. She gave one small nod. Emma noticed. You know her? She asked. Yes, I said. Before she could press, the microphone tapped twice, and the room quieted. The mayor began thanking local sponsors for supporting rural jobs, school programs, and equipment grants for small contractors across the county. I felt Caleb move closer to my side. Then the mayor said my name. Not casually, not as a mistake. Clearly, we would like to recognize Michael Thompson, incoming chairman of Thompson Regional Equipment and the new Community Development Fund. The room shifted. Heads turned. Conversations stopped in pieces. Emma's hand tightened around the strap of her purse. On the screen behind the stage, the company logo appeared, along with the list of assets, properties, and grants already approved for the county. I did not move right away. I let the truth settle without chasing it. Then Caleb looked up at me and whispered, Dad, is that you? I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Yes, buddy, I said. It is. When I stepped forward, I did not look at Emma first. I looked at the room, at the people who worked for a living, at the teachers, contractors, shop owners, and parents who understood that value does not always arrive polished. My voice stayed steady as I thanked my uncle, my son, and the community that had taught me what real work meant. When I finally glanced back, Emma was standing perfectly still, her face pale with the kind of realization no apology can outrun. She had not missed a party. She had missed the man who had been building a future right in front of her. After the gala, the winter night was crisp and clear, the streets quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional crunch of snow underfoot. Michael Thompson guided Caleb through the driveway toward the Ford, the boy's small hand gripping his father's with trust and certainty, his eyes still wide from the evening's spectacle. Emma stood at the edge of the porch, framed by the soft yellow glow of the porch light, coat buttoned neatly, her expression a mixture of disbelief, hesitation, and the faint recognition that the world she had assumed she understood had shifted without warning. The wet driveway reflected the light in long, fractured lines, and for the first time, she seemed to see the depth of the calm power Michael had cultivated in quiet hours of labor, patience, and careful decision-making. Michael crouched slightly to adjust Caleb's scarf, speaking in low tones about the night sky and the quiet of winter, creating a moment of normalcy amid the sudden revelation. Caleb looked up at his mother with innocent curiosity, asking if she wanted to see his new paper bridge, a gift he had labored over quietly, unaware of the broader stakes playing out around him. Emma's lips parted, and she stepped forward a fraction, but Michael held his position, calm and unflinching, allowing the moment to exist on its own terms without interference or confrontation. He understood that recognition and understanding could not be forced. They had to be discovered through observation and consequence. Caleb smiled at both of them, his small gesture a reminder that life's value often lay in quiet connections and shared trust, not in appearances, power, or social approval. The Ford's engine hummed faintly as it warmed, filling the silence with the ordinary sound of reliability, echoing the lesson Michael had imparted through months of quiet preparation and careful attention. Emma's gaze shifted from father to son and back. catching the subtle details she had once ignored. The careful way he carried Caleb's small hand, the composure in his posture, the calm that came not from wealth displayed, but from discipline, patience, and foresight. Michael guided Caleb toward the truck, waiting for a moment before turning to look at Emma once more, silently conveying that the life he had built was deliberate, measured, and resilient, and that while she had the choice to engage or step back, the equilibrium of his family would remain steady. Emma nodded slightly, the recognition settling over her quietly, and she stepped back to allow them passage, understanding that some lessons were learned not through argument or confrontation, but through patience, consistent action, and the quiet demonstration of character over time. Michael and Caleb entered the truck, the warmth of the interior contrasting with the cold night. Caleb chattering softly about the upcoming year, about school and his little projects, his trust in his father unwavering. While outside, Emma lingered for only a moment longer, witnessing the result of diligence, integrity, and measured strength before finally stepping back into the night. The porch light casting long shadows that spoke of endings, awareness, and the quiet triumph of a life. Carefully constructed. The early hours of January 2nd brought a quiet clarity to the Thompson household, the frost outside sparkling faintly in the first rays of sunlight, while inside Michael sat at the kitchen table, Caleb asleep on the couch beside him, a small blanket pulled tight around his shoulders. The envelope from the lawyer lay on the counter, still unopened, a symbol of opportunities that had been earned and carefully safeguarded. Yet Michael allowed himself to savor the morning in simple domestic rhythms, listening to the faint hum of the heater and the distant sounds of a neighborhood waking up. Emma had not yet stirred, and for the first time, the absence of her critique felt like space rather than tension. Michael poured coffee into a chipped mug, steam curling into the air, and reflected on the months that had led here. The small breakfasts, the careful budgeting, the late nights of organizing repairs and preparing invoices, each act a deliberate brick in the foundation of a future that was quietly solidifying. Caleb stirred, rubbing his eyes and stretching, and Michael gently guided him to the table for a simple breakfast, talking about small tasks and everyday decisions with the kind of calm authority that had been built over years of patient effort. Later, they walked through the garage together, Caleb asking questions about tools and how machines worked, Michael answering patiently, linking lessons in mechanics to lessons in life. Observation, patience, planning, and integrity. The light from the high windows cast long streaks across the concrete floor, illuminating bolts, wrenches, and the small models Caleb had made to represent bridges and towers, emphasizing the rhythm and order of ordinary work that had become the backbone of their lives. By afternoon, Michael reviewed the legal documents once more, considering property, investments, and future opportunities with meticulous care, planning the steps that would allow the family to maintain stability, prosperity, and freedom from external judgment. Outside, the snow began to melt, revealing the driveway and yard in muted colors, and Michael felt the quiet satisfaction of a life built deliberately, without spectacle, without need for recognition, grounded in steady work and thoughtful decisions. Caleb played with his wooden bridges and model trains, Michael providing guidance and encouragement, reinforcing the values of focus, diligence, and careful action. Emma appeared at the edge of the porch, coat buttoned neatly, hands in pockets, her expression a mixture of realization, hesitation, and acknowledgement that the world she assumed she controlled had quietly shifted. Michael guided Caleb to the Ford, holding his hand firmly, calmly, while Emma lingered, silent for a long moment, finally understanding that the man she had underestimated had created a life of strength, patience, and control without seeking her approval. The frost glinted on the driveway, the porch light casting shadows that stretched long and calm across the property, reflecting the deliberate, measured, and unshakable foundation Michael had built, a life that now, quietly, could not be dismissed, rewritten, or ignored. And as he and Caleb drove away, the still night held Emma at the edge of the porch, witnessing the result of consistency, foresight, and steadfast dedication, fully aware that the quiet triumphs of a man who works patiently for years are often more powerful than any spectacle.